question. All right, we want to start with the offensive line?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
All right.
You want me to go first? Am I just naming off my top three, just kind of talking about them, and then we'll throw it back to you? Is
Yeah,
that
so
what we're
anyway,
doing?
all these rankings, there's actually a big umbrella article over there at PFF.com, best units in the NFL, where you can see a link to all of the individual articles and break off from there and go through them. But yeah, let's go with the offensive line. What do you think are the top three offensive lines in the NFL heading into this season?
Sure. So Zoltan wrote this article of the top offensive lines in the NFL. He had the Detroit Lions at number one, Philadelphia Eagles at number two, and then the Indianapolis Colts at number three. Mine is similar. I agree that I think the Detroit Lions and the Philadelphia Eagles are in this top three. But then my third is the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Falcons' offensive line is awesome. And, Chris Lindstrom, anybody who listens to this podcast and, follows the work of PFF and sees our data over the years, they've seen how good Chris Lindstrom is. He's one of the highest graded players, not even just offensive linemen, players that we've had in the league over the last couple of years. So, with him on this team at right guard, I mean, that's a spearhead there. Jake Matthews at the offensive tackle spot, Caleb Ngary at the other offensive tackle spot. Drew Dahlman at center. I think certainly his run blocking grade really helped elevate this unit last year. And then I was a big Matthew Bergeron guy coming out of the draft a couple of years ago. So I still think that he's going to continue to get better and better. And when you look at Atlanta and even what they just did last year, like you could take away I think this unit's going to get better. I think that they're going to improve. Last year alone, Atlanta, 21.5% pressure percentage allowed, of course, because it's offensive line. That's second best in the NFL. So in pass blocking as a unit, second best in the NFL when it came to mitigating pressure against. And then when it came to positively graded run blocking plays, 82.4%, which is extremely high, second best in the NFL. So this team was really good in pass protection when it came to not allowing pressures, and they were phenomenal at run blocking, earning positive grades almost more than any other team in the NFL. So to me, it's a unit that I had to put them in the top three because of the success that they had last year and even how much better I think that this group can get. So I got the Detroit Lions, the Philadelphia Eagles. I think those are sort of obvious ones. I think that you're going to have both of those in your top three. I'm intrigued if you don't, but then Atlanta is my third team there for my top three offensive lines.
Yeah, I think Atlanta has a very good offensive line. I do worry a little bit that it will be not exposed, but its job is going to be harder this year, right? Because they're pivoting away from effectively the most run-heavy offense in the NFL. They're going to a more conventional scheme. They're going to be running that kind of Sean McVay scheme, which is not one of the interesting kind of divergences, I think, between McVay and Shanahan and their coaching trees, or at least I assume their coaching trees, but certainly their schemes, is McVay's doesn't protect the offensive line the way Shanahan's does, right? Like Shanahan, every offensive line that plays under a Shanahan offense looks better than it actually is, I think. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have great players there, right? Trent Williams is still probably the best left tackle in the game, maybe the best offensive lineman, period. But right. They have weaknesses on that offensive line, and you rarely see them actually turn into problems within the game. And usually those guys play significantly better in that scheme than they do anywhere else. McVay's offensive lines actually tend to really influence how the offense goes, and they don't seem to get protected the same way. Anyway, long way around to saying this is now running a McVay type of offensive line. I'm going to assume their job is more difficult next year, particularly from a pass blocking standpoint when they're doing it more often. So I would expect that line to take a little bit of a step backwards, even if, you're right, guys like Bergeron could take a step forwards by just development. So they're not in my top three. My third best team, overall, I had the same order with the top two. Detroit number one, Philadelphia number two. Yeah. The Eagles have been the best offensive line in the league for the last couple of years, but they've got turnover now, right? They've got to replace the greatest center, arguably, of his generation, and Jason Kelce. It's a little bit of an unknown for the first time. My third team, though, is the Cleveland Browns. I still think that's a really, really good offensive line. The interior is solid at worst. They have three starting caliber offensive tackles, so they've got depth as well. That's a really good group.
Yeah, and they were down, all three of those offensive tackles at one point last year, right? I mean, like Jedrick Wills was hurt, Jack Conklin was hurt, DeJuan Jones was hurt, and Cleveland was basically right there. To be honest with you, it was between Cleveland and Atlanta, and I think if you wanted to say, hey, Cleveland's proved it more, I have no problem with you having them at number three, especially because Teller and Batonio could very well be the top two guards in the NFL when it comes to guard duos in the league. So good tackles when those guys are healthy. One of the best, if not the best, guard duo in the league. And then Ethan Posick obviously is somebody who can get it done at center as well. So this is a really strong group, and they have been for a long time. I wonder what Cleveland is now going to be like with Bill Callahan no longer there, right? Because he goes over to Tennessee. His son's now the head coach there, so he moves over to the Titans, which I'm excited for the Tennessee Titans because their offensive line was terrible last season. I mean, like, it was really bad. And so you are hoping that you get, at the very least, the coaching bump to where, like, let's just say, for argument's sake, Tennessee's got the worst offensive line in the NFL. I don't know if that's the case, but I think they're in the conversation, certainly on paper. Let's just say they have the worst offensive line in the NFL. If Bill Callahan can get them to like 20th alone, then okay, that's a massive jump for you. And Callahan was the offensive line coach for the Cleveland Browns. He's been one of the best offensive line coaches and just longtime coaches in the NFL for a long, long time. So I'm curious to see what this offensive line looks like without him. I don't think they're going to magically be bad, but just something to think about.
Yeah, the residual effects of those offensive line coaches are always interesting. Like bringing the guys in is great. You get that and that coaching bump potentially for Tennessee, but the flip side of that is how long does his impact last in Cleveland after he left, right? Does that linger for a couple of years and you sort of retain the teachings of Bill Callahan, or is it like the second that guy's out the door, the whole thing unravels? Like we've seen that before with Dante Scarnecchia in New England, right? When he left, the whole line fell apart pretty quickly, and then he kind of they got him back because the thing was a disaster without him.
Right.
So yeah, I think those guys are. There might not be a position coach that influences on-field product more than those really top-tier offensive line coaches.